is Wednesday, the 22nd day of November 2023. Hello and welcome to the News International Edition. We are coming to you live from our Vision Group headquarters here in Kampala, Uganda. I'm Emma Akwero. We start today from Palestine, where two family members of a family bid farewell to their relatives at the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, in the southern Gaza Strip, after they were killed in strikes on their buildings. Israel continues to panel the Gaza Strip on day 47 of its ongoing war with Hamas, as both sides announced a deal on Wednesday allowing at least 50 hostages and scores of Palestinian prisoners to be freed, while offering besieged Gaza residents a 4-day truce after weeks of war.
Palestinian families bid farewell to their relatives at the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip after they were killed in strikes on their building. I was displaced from the north to the south because they said it was safe there. We were 37 people at home. I don't understand why we have to endure this injustice. We have nothing to do with all of this. Injustice bears grim consequences. Where are the Arabs? Where is the Arab nation? Can they see how all these children are dying? Isn't it enough that we are suffering from hunger, siege, lack of basic necessities, and above all, bombardment of our heads? We do not know where to go. Israel continues to pummel the Gaza Strip on day 47 of its ongoing war with Hamas, as both sides announced a deal on Wednesday allowing at least 50 hostages and scores of Palestinian prisoners to be freed, while offering besieged Gaza residents a 4-day truce after weeks of all-out war. Members of the Kalusa and Abbas families were residing together in the apartment, which included children and women. Among them were babies aged 27 days and 6 months, just infants. They had been staying in this apartment for a month when suddenly 2 missiles struck, resulting in the scene you witnessed here. In the first major diplomatic breakthrough in the war, Palestinian militants will release during a 4-day truce 50 women and children kidnapped during the October 7th raid. After weeks of Qatar-brokered negotiations, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet approved the truce accord Wednesday after a near all-night meeting in which he told ministers this was a difficult decision, but it's a right decision. The cabinet sign-off was one of the last stumbling blocks after what one U.S. official described as 5 extremely excruciating weeks of talks. Hamas released a statement welcoming the humanitarian truce and said it would also see 150 Palestinians released from Israeli jails. The resistance is committed to the truce as long as the occupation honors it, a Hamas official told our reporter. Hamas gunmen carried out October 7th a cross-border attack, the worst in Israel's history, that left around 1,200 people dead, most of them civilians, according to the Israeli government. Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups also took an estimated 240 Israelis and foreign hostages, among them elderly people and young children. Israel declared war on Hamas, vowing to bring the hostages home and to destroy the militant group. It launched a major bombing campaign and ground offensive in Gaza, which, according to the Hamas government in the territory, has killed 14,100 people, thousands of them children. Israel said that to facilitate the hostage release, it would initiate a 4-day pause in its 6-week-old air, land and sea assault on Gaza, while it stressed that the agreement did not spell the end of the war. For every 10 additional hostages released, there would be an extra day's pause, the Israeli government said. The negotiations have involved the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, Israel's overseas spy agency Mossad, Egyptian intelligence, and leaders in Doha, Cairo, Washington, Gaza, and Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden said he was extraordinarily gratified that some of these brave souls will be reunited with their families once this deal is fully implemented. Qatar's foreign ministry confirmed the deal, saying that a number of Palestinian women and children detained in Israeli prisons would be released in exchange for the hostages.
Now, following a deal on Wednesday between Israel and Hamas allowing at least 50 hostages and scores of Palestinian prisoners to be freed, Israelis have expressed mixed reactions. Despite the release, there is an estimated 240 Israelis and foreigners still held captive in Gaza by Hamas militants, while the released are worried about those they have left behind.
Israel and Hamas announced a deal on Wednesday, allowing at least 50 hostages and scores of Palestinian prisoners to be freed while offering besieged Gaza residents a 4-day truce after weeks of all-out war. In the first major diplomatic breakthrough in the bloodiest ever Gaza war, Palestinian militants are set to release 50 women and children kidnapped during their deadly October 7th raids into southern Israel. Doron Klein, an architect from Tel Aviv, believes it's a very promising step towards the right direction.
Everybody's very hopeful to see the children come home, and anybody that comes home for us is very important. It's very complicated. There are risks involved, but the point of us being here is to make sure that everybody comes home. So this is an important step.
He, however, expressed fear that the Hamas could step back only to re-attack.
Everybody is that this will give the Hamas time to reorganize and will pay a price with more soldiers that will be killed.
After weeks of Qatar-brokered negotiations, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet approved the Truce Accord at the end of an almost all-night meeting, with the premier telling ministers this was a difficult decision, but it's a right decision. Hamas welcomed the humanitarian truce and said it would see 150 Palestinians released from Israeli jails. Sheikhs, a student from Misgav, expressed mixed emotions about his fellow citizens that are returning.
It's a mix of emotions, both sad and also in some places happy. I'm happy to see that that hostages are gonna be returning, but at the same time, it's like what's gonna be the consequence that we're returning back people who have done terrible things. It's scary.
Mava Tovia, a teacher from Jerusalem, is on the other hand worried about the hostages that haven't had a chance to be set free yet.
We are happy for everyone that comes out and being released, and we are still thinking about the people left behind. It's really heartbreaking, and I feel torn. I feel like there's no air.
The war started after Hamas gunmen on October 7th launched the worst attack in Israel's history that left around 1,200 people dead, most of them civilians, according to the Israeli government. Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups also took an estimated 240 Israelis and foreigners hostage, among them elderly people and children. Israel declared war on Hamas, vowing to bring the hostages home and to destroy the militant group. Sources from Hamas and the Islamic Jihad group had earlier told our reporter the truce would include a ceasefire on the ground and a pause in Israeli air operations over southern Gaza. The negotiations have involved the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, Israel's overseas spy agency Mossad, Egyptian intelligence, and leaders in Doha, Cairo, Washington, Gaza, and Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden said he was extraordinarily gratified that some of these brave souls will be reunited with their families once the deal is fully implemented.
Now, Xi Jinping has called for an immediate release of civilian detainees and a ceasefire between war between Israel and Hamas as the Chinese president addressed a virtual summit of fellow BRICS leaders. Pretoria is hosting a virtual meeting of BRICS, a group of major emerging economies that include Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, aimed at growing a common response to the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Xi Jinping on Tuesday called for the release of civilian detainees and an immediate ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas, state media said, as the Chinese president addressed a virtual summit of fellow BRICS leaders. He did not make specific reference to the estimated 240 hostages abducted from Israel by Hamas last month, nor to the Palestinian prisoners being held by Israel. China expresses deep concerns. The most pressing matter of the moment is, firstly, the parties to the conflict must end hostilities and achieve a ceasefire immediately, stop all violence and attacks against civilians, release civilians held captive, and act to prevent the loss of more lives and spare people from more miseries. Xi also called for an international peace conference to resolve the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The collective punishment of people in Gaza in the form of forced transfer or water, electricity and fuel deprivation must stop. Third, the international community must act with practical measures to prevent the conflict from spilling over and endangering stability in the Middle East as a whole. Given the current circumstances, it is very timely and necessary that the BRICS countries meet and speak up for justice and for peace on the Palestinian-Israeli issue. Such a conference would, she added, work toward an early solution to the question of Palestine that is comprehensive, just and sustainable. Since the outbreak of the latest Palestinian-Israeli conflict, China has been working actively to promote peace talks and a ceasefire, he said. Beijing, he said, has provided humanitarian assistance to help ease the humanitarian plight in Gaza and will continue to do so. Pretoria is hosting a virtual meeting of BRICS, a group of major emerging economies that include Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, aimed at drawing up a common response to the Israeli-Hamas conflict. Fighting has raged in Gaza after Hamas gunmen killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians, during cross-border raids on October 7th, the deadliest attack in Israel's history. In retaliation, Israel launched a relentless bombing campaign and ground offensive in Gaza, which is ruled by Hamas. According to Hamas, the war has killed more than 13,300 people, thousands of them children. China has historically been sympathetic to the Palestinians and supportive of a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Beijing has been calling for an immediate ceasefire since the start of the war last month.
Now, away from the Palestine-Israel war, let's head over now to Ukraine, where Swedish supplied Leopard 2A5 battle tank operating near eastern Ukraine frontline, a tank whose efficiency, the crew confirms, has saved many lives. The Ukrainian army lost one of its rare and precious Leopard 2A6 tanks outside Advika in eastern Ukraine, apparently sometime earlier this month. The loss, which may have been the result of a malfunction that the compelled German-made Leopard 2A64 crew to bail outside, is notably for two reasons. First, the loss it extended Ukraine's unfortunate streak of Leopard 2 losses. The current savior are super armored Swedish variants of the Leopard 2A5.
Основна задача цього танка
The main task of this tank in this area is to inflict as much damage on the enemy as possible.
Цей танк, він рятує життя, насправді, тому що
This tank saves lives because there is a fourth crew member who is charging it, who basically performs the function that the conveyor belt does in the T-72 and T-64. Basically, if a T-72 or T-64 tank is hit in the wrong place, it just goes off into space.
Використовувати їх для такого от наступу, їх потрібно в більшій кількості.
The Leopard tanks need to be in greater numbers to use them in such offensives. That is, this tank is very effective, but in order to conduct large-scale offensives, you need to have a greater number of tanks, of course. The more tanks we have, the more such offensives we can carry out.
Now from Indonesia, a group of around 200 Rohingya refugees huddled on the beaches of a remote island cordoned off by yellow tape meant to stop them from running away after weeks adrift on a wooden boat. The latest arrivals were part of more than 1,000 desperate and exhausted members of the group who landed on the shores of Aceh province in western Indonesia last week.
More than 200 Rohingya refugees were huddled on the beaches of a remote Indonesian island Wednesday after weeks adrift on a wooden boat as authorities rejected locals' efforts to push the members of the persecuted Myanmar minority back to the sea. The latest arrivals were part of more than 1,000 desperate and exhausted members of the group who landed on the shores of Aceh province in western Indonesia in the last week.
The largest refugee came from Bangladesh. So today we are here approximately 200 of our male and female. So we here because of when we leave Bangladesh camp, we don't safe here. Camp are burning, different kind of unknown party. We don't know. Our camp are burned in fire.
Thousands of the Muslim Rohingya risk their lives each year making sea journeys from refugee camps in Bangladesh, often in flimsy boats, to try to reach Malaysia or Indonesia. But they were rejected by locals who threatened to put them back to sea.
Where we can go and where we can save. Then decided, we think that, and we heard Indonesia is the best country for refugee. So that's why we decided we are going to Indonesia. So me and my family come on that boat to come here in Indonesia.
The latest group of 219 refugees, which includes 72 men, 91 women and 56 children, arrived in Sabang city in Aceh province, located on an island off the tip of northern Sumatra at around 11 p.m. local time Tuesday. Local authorities then agreed to their relocation by ferry later on Wednesday to a temporary shelter in one of Aceh's biggest cities, the UN Refugee Agency said. Their hopes are not demanding, they just want a life that is more humane, without tortures, where they can be accepted and given their basic rights as human beings, to be able to take care of themselves by working for a living. That's what they wish for. He said the relocation had been coordinated with UNHCR and the refugees had been given food and drink after their arrival. The group had spent 15 days at sea after leaving Bangladesh for Aceh, Abdul Rahman said. The engine of their vessel, which could be seen bobbing offshore, had been damaged, leaving them unable to travel elsewhere, he added. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees said Aceh's locals have sought to push Rohingya boats from Bangladesh back to sea 3 times in the last week. Many Acehs, who themselves have memories of decades of bloody conflicts, have long been sympathetic to the plight of their fellow Muslims. But some say their patience has been tested, claiming the Rohingya consume scarce resources and occasionally come into conflict with locals. The refugees were seen huddled on a beach in Sabang on Wednesday, surrounded by a yellow cordon and security officers to stop them from running away. More than 1 million from the ethnic group have fled Myanmar since the 1990s, most in the wake of 2017 military crackdown that forced the bulk of them to settle in camps in Bangladesh. Indonesia is not a signatory to the United Nations Refugee Convention and says it is not compelled to take in refugees from Myanmar, complaining that neighboring countries have shut their doors. But rights groups said Jakarta should be doing more to help under other international conventions, such as those that enshrine the safety of life at sea.
And now from the continent of Africa, from Ivory Coast. After exceptionally heavy rains, the cocoa harvest in the country is said to be very meager, supplying around 40% of the world's cocoa. The Ivory Coast is the world's leading producer. But this year, cocoa warehouses are almost empty and lorries transporting the famous beans are arriving in dribs and drabs.
Well above average rains in most of Ivory Coast's main cocoa regions triggered fears of flooding and disease, which could damage the April to September mid-crop, farmers said. Ivory Coast, the world's top cocoa producer, is in its rainy season, which runs officially from April to mid-November. Cocoa plantations in some areas will be flooded if it continues to rain heavily in the coming weeks, farmers said, adding that high moisture levels could attract insects and disease. This year is empty. Usually this place is full of cocoa, but as you can see, there is nothing. Everything is empty, there is no cocoa. The pallets are empty. I've never seen this. I'm having the worst year. Since I've been in the cocoa business, I have never seen a year like this. But it's the rain. It was the rain that caused this because we had too much rain in the high season. When the cocoa was blooming, we had too much rain, so all the flowers were washed away. That's it. Cocoa doesn't like too much rain. It likes the rain, but not too much of it. If it rains too much, when the tree is flowering, it washes everything away and then the campaign fails just like that. The southern region of Agboville, which had 66.9 millimeters above average, farmers said heavy rains could cause young fruits to fall off the trees and reduce the size of the mid-crop. Monique Kofiman Amenan, another farmer, worries about finding school fees after a poor harvest. Children go to school, but if the cocoa plant doesn't yield, how are we going to send the children to school? My husband's one daughter who's going to take the BTS this year, and then there is another child who's going to start 6th grade this year. But in any case, cocoa production isn't going to help us this year. This year, production has gone down. Last year, we would have as many as 40 heads, 40 pots, but this year, we've had 10 or 15, no more than that. In the center-western region of Daloa and the central regions of Bangno and Yamoussoukro, farmers said more sun was needed to help the crop. Average temperatures ranged from 25.4 to 29.7 degrees Celsius in Ivory Coast last week. Average temperatures ranged from 25.4 to 29.7 degrees Celsius throughout the year.
And finally, Thailand has captured more than 150 rogue iguanas that were rampaging throughout the countryside, raiding farms and damaging the local environment, officials said. The lizards will be kept at wildlife centers, including one in Nakhon Nayok, northeast of Bangkok. Environmental concerns have been raised over the activities of the herbivorous latilians, which are thought to be pets that have either escaped or been deliberately released into the wild. The Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation said on Tuesday that 134 iguanas had been captured in Patana Nikom district, around 160 kilometers north of Bangkok. A further 6 were discovered in Uthon Thani in the country's northeast and 23 more elsewhere in Thailand. The cold-blooded captives, which can grow to more than 1.5 meters, will be kept at wildlife centers, including one in Nakhon Nayok, northeast of Bangkok. The department also said around 260 people across 61 provinces have informed officials that they own iguanas, more than 3,600 lizards in total. Earlier in the week, officials banned the import of the scaly creatures over environmental concerns. Authorities said violators will face a maximum of 10 years in jail and a fine of up to $1 million, equivalent to $28,417.
On iguanas raiding farms and damaging the local environment in Thailand, from the news reported, iguanas have been found in many areas such as Lopburi and Kam Chanot. Overall, we captured around 200 iguanas. For those who are concerned of what happened after they were captured, we want to show you this place. We are preparing more cages and care by veterinary teams. We learned from veterinarians that iguanas are herbivorous, so they will not hurt our native animals.
And that's all the international news we had for you this afternoon. We'll be back again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Thank you for watching and do have yourselves a splendid afternoon.